Welcome to a brand new episode of the Digital Adoption Show, your go to podcast for cutting edge insights and innovative strategies in today's dynamic work environment. I'm your host, Abhirami Prakash, team lead for sales development at WhatFlex. In this episode, we'll get inside the mind of an employee branding guru, Brian Adams. We're so excited to have Brian on our podcast today. Brian is the CEO and founder of Create Creator, a top employer branding agency known worldwide. Brian has spent over 19 years shaping the way we think about employer branding, working with the very big names in the industry like Apple, American Airlines, and Blizzard Entertainment, to name a few. His fresh and sometimes very bold ideas have made him a key figure in the industry, always pushing the boundaries of what's possible in employer branding and employer value proposition. Brian is more than just a leader in his field. He is a best selling author, a podcaster, and a speaker who knows exactly how to engage and inspire his audience. His books, Give and Get Employer Branding and Getting Goosebumps, explore the deep connections between brands and people. His talks are full of energy and insight, whether he's discussing marketing, attracting talent, or creating unforgettable customer experiences. Brian's work and ideas have been featured in major publications, including the Financial Times, showing his commitment to helping organizations achieve great results by really understanding the core nature of the people and their business. Brian is behind the success of Be It Creative, an agency that stands out for its dedication to understanding clients deeply, designing unique experiences, and delivering results that matter. They're known for building close relationships with their clients, following Brian's belief in the Jerry Maguire strategy of focusing on fewer clients but with more personalized attention. As we get into today's conversation, get ready to be inspired by Brian's passion, innovation, and dedication to making a difference in the world of employer branding. Welcome to our podcast today, Brian.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. Before we dive into our main discussion today, let's kick this off with our new segment, the Digital Pulse. This is really where we try to connect the dots between passion and profession, uncovering how individual journeys shape visionary leadership. So, Brian, is there a passion or activity outside of work that's particularly close to your heart?
Thinking about what connects the dots, I've got to say it's got to be storytelling. So I'm outside of work, I'm a huge movie fan. I love going to the cinema and watching movies with my son and not just being entertained by stories, but deconstructing them. And then inside of our company, storytelling is huge, the story structure and how to communicate effectively. So that's a passion outside of work, and it definitely bleeds into my day-to-day business life as well.
That's really lovely to hear. It's really hard to sometimes stop something that you're passionate about
Hmm.
and you drop the line at the end of a workday. So that's great. Next, we move to our short rapid fire round, the triple strike, as we like to call it, where we ask our guests three quirky questions and expect a fun answer to get a deeper glimpse into their mind. Are you ready to be triple strike, Brian?
I am ready.
All right, let's go. So, Brian, question one. If you could chat with any animal, which one would it be? And what is the first thing you would ask it?
So I think it would be a dolphin because they always look like they're having fun and they zip around the ocean. And I've been deep sea diving a number of times, but I'd love to know, like, what is beyond the depths that humans go to? What's down there? What are we missing?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's a very nice answer. So, Brian, on to our question number two. If you were to win $1 million today in the lottery, how would you use it?
So I think I would immediately buy a vacation home in Italy, more specifically in the heart of Tuscany.
Really smart thinking. And why Tuscany?
Well, I was supposed to get married there a few years ago and it didn't quite work out, but we've vacationed there as a family a number of times. And I just think it's one of the most beautiful, magical places on earth. I just absolutely love it.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. And I hope you make your Tuscany really, really soon. Last question. If you could have any celebrity as a best friend, who would it be and why?
This is a tough one, but controversial. I'm going to go with Tom Cruise because I'm a a secret, not secret Tom Cruise fan. I love all of his movies, and I really admire how he goes about pushing himself in his career. And of course, the Jerry Maguire strategy is part of our business. So fewer clients, more personal relationships. So definitely Tom Cruise.
Okay. I kind of had a feeling you might say that during the Jerry Maguire ethos,
Yeah.
but that's lovely. Those are some truly extraordinary answers and great. Really hit the spot right there. Now that you're comfortably settled in, hopefully, let's dive into some of our more substantial topics today, particularly those that I'm sure our listeners are eagerly anticipating. Brian, why don't you tell our audience a little more about yourself and also maybe the story behind what really inspired you to dive into the world of employer branding and start PH Creative?
Yeah, absolutely. So 20 years ago in next month will be the day I started PH Creative. And it all started spontaneously after I was treated quite mean and poorly by a boss at the time who shouted at me in front of about 50 people and made me feel like I was about 4 inches tall. So I just spontaneously went home that night, didn't go back and started PH Creative the very next day, just determined to prove that I could start a successful company and not be a horrible person in the pursuit of success. So we started as a general design, branding, marketing agency. And it wasn't until a good few years later that we started working with brands in the recruitment space. And we thought, this is interesting, more interesting than working with marketing departments. HR people tended to be a little bit nicer to us. They also answered the phone when we called them up. It was easier to win business. So we took the plunge and started to really niche down and focus specifically in this space. And I think that the day we made that decision was a very good day for the organization. We started to grow, and it took us on a weird and wonderful journey that has been fantastic.
Wow, I think if your boss could look back now, I think over the years, that would truly be a huge moment right then. And I'm really glad that that spiraled your career and how.
Absolutely, as am I.
Perfect. So, Brian, you've been building your company for nearly 20 years, if not more. What would you give credit to really for the success of your company today?
I think the short answer to this is other people, but other people in many different forms. Early on in my business career, I nearly went out of business several times, and it was different people coaching and mentoring me that helped me navigate tricky and dicey waters. The biggest thing I've always taken away from coaching and mentoring and having people around you is daring to think differently and stepping outside of the day to day to really spend time working on the business, not in the business. And something I do every year now is I'll write a plan for the year, usually around New Year or Christmas time, and I'll come back to that plan and try and think bigger. So a mindset of thinking bigger and not being limited by limited beliefs. And then I guess the big one, which is it always served me well over the last 20 years, is surrounding myself with really smart, talented people that I can trust and listen to, take counsel from, and just focus on supporting them to do their thing. So yeah, other people is the short answer.
And that's really amazing. I think at the end of the day, an organization is as good as people backing it. So that's truly speaks volumes right there. In fact, to your another question around what makes you stand out, every company wants to be a great employer brand, I'm sure. What are you doing differently at PH Creative for your clients, and how are you achieving success right there?
Yeah, so we we've made a name for ourselves with a point of difference that served us well, rather than approaching employer brand the same as every other agency in our space. Obviously, we've been around quite a long time, so we're sort of one of the founding companies to be in this space. But rather than focus on building a brand which is based on strengths and benefits and opportunities of a workplace, we also embrace the fact that it's a two-way value exchange. It's a two-way street. Companies have got lots to offer employees, but by clearly articulating what is expected in return, what we found, and this is sort of sounds counterintuitive by talking about the adversities and harsh realities inside of an organization, what we found is a candidate audience, people making decisions whether to join a company or not, have more information to decide whether they have what it takes to thrive or survive inside that organization. So they make better career decisions. And also, if it's a give and get methodology that we call it in PH, and you're clearly setting out what you've got to give as well as what you stand to get, you can judge for yourself, is this a company for me? And you can imagine yourself in that organization and, as I say, make better decisions. So that's at the heart of what stands us apart from other agencies. And in fact, we've changed the industry, and now the give and get methodology has been embraced as a sort of a standard approach in the employer brand space, which obviously is something we're really proud of.
That's amazing. And I think the fact that you've had some very loyal clients across the years speaks volumes to that as well. Fran, you're also the author of two amazing books. Another additional feather on that very full cap right there. One excerpt from your book that really truly fascinated me from Give and Get Employer Branding was the most effective employer brands don't attract candidates, they repel them. Can you talk more about that? How would that be effective?
Yeah. So I guess I touched on that slightly with the previous question, but to dive a little bit deeper there, I think the more clear and confident an organization is about who they are and what they have to offer somebody, you also get clarity on who isn't a good fit, who isn't a good match, who isn't a good culture add. And with with the specificity of what it really takes to grow your career, to add value to an organization, and to ultimately find a sense of purpose, impact, and belonging inside of a company, you need to know the challenges and obstacles, the commitments, the sacrifices, the adversities and harsh realities that are going to be part of your day to day, that are going to be part of the employee experience. Now, when you have all of that information, not everybody is going to be compelled and attracted to that proposition. So the sort of counterintuitive thought is that's okay. We don't just want to be generally the most attractive and have an increase in applicants such that it's difficult to offer a candidate experience and it's difficult to find those people that will really thrive inside of your organization. So actually, if we think about employer brand as more of a smart filter than a magnet to attract, then just sheer maths tells us for every candidate considering applying for a role, it's likely that there's more people that it's not a good fit for than those who are ideally matched. And that's the concept. If you set out to put your talent audience to a very clear decision, then your employer brand is adding value and is helping you and the candidate audience. And the sheer numbers tell you that you will, by definition, repel more people than are compelled towards you. And cutting right through it, that's the secret to creating a very compelling brand. It's not being afraid of those people that you are actually turning off.
So that's really lovely to hear directly from you. In fact, you work very closely with big brands in defining their EVP strategies. What are some emerging trends in employer branding?
So some of the trends this year, still a carry on from last year. Return to the office is a big challenge that a lot of organizations are facing. Try to stay relevant and valuable to employees that are definitely going to have upheaval and change in their life if they're forced to go back to an office. That's a big challenge to maintain any sort of positivity around your brand while that's happening. There's also an AI revolution at the moment where the sort of poorly kept secret, if you like, is leaders of organizations with pressure to add stakeholder, shareholder value are replacing jobs with AI, but they still need to do that with dignity, compassion, and empathy for their people and still be perceived as a great place to work. So that's something that is largely not being talked about much, but is definitely something most organizations are navigating. We've also seen a slight overcorrection in the space of diversity, where it's created some hesitancy for organizations to really lean in and maintain all of the brand equity they've built up over the last 2 years for political and social reasons, which are getting in the way of doing the right thing and maintaining diversity, equity, and inclusion within organizations. So that's quite precarious for a lot of organizations. On top of the economy and the volatility of civil unrest and the potential of wars breaking out here, there, and everywhere, there's a lot of unknown and change in many organizations. And I think that's the common theme, dealing with change.
Noted. And Ryan, speaking very closely to the trends, could you also share an example of a potentially challenging situation in the world of employer branding?
Yeah. So if you imagine an organization that suddenly mandates people to go back to the office, however, over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a significant transition to work from home, such that people who have spouses with different jobs, they've relocated, they've created a world for themselves on the other side of the country. Your spouse might have a job that requires them to be local already. Being faced with having to sell your house, take your kids out of the local school, and go back to the office that you originally were located near is a potential minefield times however many thousand people work for you. So that's a real life challenge that a number of organizations are having to navigate right now. And of course, all through that, you're going to definitely lose people. You then have to replace those people somehow. And if you have to replace thousands of people spread across an organization, spread across an entire country, and suddenly they need to be replaced in one city, that can be difficult. And through it all, you need to remain relevant to a talent audience and compelling and attractive and maintain productivity, all of which employer brand plays a huge role. So that's that's probably the biggest real life example that's happening in many organizations around the world at the moment.
And Brian, is there any way that you would advise one can approach this challenge?
Absolutely. I think in some cases, the decision to move back to office can demonstrate being a little bit detached from the reality of your employee base. So the first thing is the strategic decisions of the company need to be aligned with the communications, and there needs to be a plan from an employer branding perspective. 99% of the success will come from the alignment of those things. If that decision is mandated and you have to just get on with it, then transparency, regular communication, and working really hard to remind people of the value of the organization and why it's worth the uplift and the trauma of potentially having to relocate your life. And constant communication and making sure that the themes of your employer brand and your EVP are still relevant. You need to be talking about things that people care about. And if you can find stories where people have successfully relocated, they have navigated challenge, they, in their own words, articulate why it's worthwhile and what it means to them, then taking it from a company mandate perspective and company communications to voice of the employee is probably the most effective and compelling way to bring people along that journey with you.
That's quite intriguing. And I'm sure there's a very detailed approach behind how to really implement it successfully. But how do you really measure the success of an employer branding effort? Are there any specific metrics or feedback that one should look out for?
Yeah, so detached of what's going on in the organization, there's some key metrics that we always like to track. Quality of hire is a big one, but the percentage of valued applicants from an attraction perspective, especially if you apply the lens of a smart filter rather than a magnet to attract. So for every 100 or for every 1,000 applicants, how many are really qualified and valuable to the organization in terms of how they measure up and how many you take forward? So that's the sort of macro metric from an attraction perspective. From an employee based perspective, employee happiness obviously is an easy one. From a net promoter score, there's various levels of engagement, from advocacy and ambassadorship to referral metrics is always a good indicator of general happiness, as well as the net promoter score. But from the retention point of view, we really like to look at regrettable loss. So, of those people leaving, how many do you wish they would stay, and how many would you rehire? Because you can be losing a lot of people from an organization, but if you wouldn't rehire any of them, then it's not such a big problem. If all of your rising stars and top performers are leaving, now that's a different story. So from a detached macro perspective, those metrics we deem to be really important. And then beyond that, what you measure from an employer branding perspective should be the indicators that demonstrate the brand value that is attributed to existing priorities inside of an organization. So if you're struggling to hire creatives or technical experts to drive innovation, because that's a massive part of your business strategy, then that's something you can measure the effectiveness of from an employer brand point of view that your leaders actually care about. So the trick is to understand and align with the business metrics and the key priorities that already exist within your company.
Noted, Brian. That's really insightful. In fact, for companies looking to refresh or develop their employer brand, what advice would you give them as a starting point?
So everything we do is based in research. Hopefully a good employer brand is aligned with the direction of a business such that it has longevity beyond 3 to 5 years. But the easy is kind of like your shop window, the snapshot representative of how it feels to be part of your organization today and what the organization is asking you to contribute in order to add to the value and success of the company today. So typically that EDP will have pillars or themes, and it really is pulse checking, making sure that those themes are still relevant to navigating the landscape of what the organization needs to move forward and how it feels and what it looks like to be inside your company as an employee. So it all starts with research, and that can be a survey, it can be interviews, it can be focus groups. We always say make sure there's a good cross section. So make sure that you're looking at different levels of seniority, different tenured people. So people who've been there 5 minutes, and others like people who've been there for 5, 10, 15, 25 years. And then obviously make sure there's a good diversity mix there as well. And you're representing all geographies and locations. So with that cross section, we always say data tells you what, but people tell you why. So making sure you take the time to do these sometimes unscalable tasks of really listening to people and understanding what their preferences and priorities are, what they deem to be the most valuable character and capability, skill sets and personality attributes to thrive inside of your organization. These are all insights required to build something meaningful that's compelling to people and valuable to the organization. And it has to be both of those things.
Fantastic. In fact, this was all around a wonderful discussion, Brian. Your perspectives on employer branding have been incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for taking all the time to talk to us today. To our listeners, we encourage you to explore these enlightening conversations on the Digital Adoption Show across all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google, YouTube, and more. Whether you're at home or on the go, our podcast is your gateway to learning trends and digital adoption. I'm your host, Abhirami, signing off for the day. Stay tuned for more engaging and informative episodes coming your way.